The myth of self liberation. Why oppressed groups can't dismantle systems alone. What if everything we've been told about overcoming discrimination is fundamentally wrong? What if the narrative that hard work, education, and determination are enough to break through systemic barriers is actually a convenient fiction that maintains the status quo? I recently had the extraordinary privilege of interviewing Dr. Lori Wheaton, whose revolutionary research has shattered conventional wisdom about oppression and liberation. Dr. Wheaton isn't just another academic, she's a visionary whose data driven approach has transformed how we understand power dynamics in society. After spending 20 years documenting the invisible barriers facing marginalized communities, she's developed frameworks that are now being adopted by progressive organizations worldwide. Her courage to speak truth to power has quite literally changed lives and institutional policies across continents. The insights I'm about to share with you aren't just theories. They're backed by rigorous research and lived experiences, and they demand that we fundamentally reconsider who bears responsibility for dismantling systems of oppression. Let's start with something concrete. In April 2025, while the US economy added 177,000 jobs, Black women lost 106,000 positions, not gained fewer, lost. Six figures of livelihoods vanished. This wasn't random chance or individual failure. This was systemic. When I first saw these numbers, I couldn't believe them. So I dug deeper. What happened? As economic uncertainty grew, companies began quiet layoffs. And guess which roles were cut first? The diversity focused positions, the community outreach coordinators, the equity specialists, roles disproportionately filled by Black women. Years of incremental gains were threatened almost overnight. And this wasn't about performance reviews or productivity metrics. This was about who was considered expendable when times got tough. We've been sold a dangerous myth, the myth that marginalized people can bootstrap their way out of oppression, that Black people can end racism through excellence, that women can stop misogyny through competence, that if you just work harder, speak more eloquently, dress more professionally, earn more degrees, then maybe, just maybe, you'll be treated with basic dignity and fairness. It's a comforting story for those who benefit from the current system. It absolves them of responsibility. It places the burden of change squarely on the shoulders of those already carrying the heaviest loads. But Dr. Wheaton's research exposes this for what it is, a fundamental misunderstanding of how power operates in our society. Let's be absolutely clear about something. Oppression is not an individual problem with individual solutions. It's systemic, it's institutional, it's baked into our policies, our practices, our cultural norms, and our unconscious biases. The system isn't broken, it's functioning exactly as designed. And no amount of individual excellence can overcome a rigged game. Consider this. Black women are now earning college degrees at higher rates than ever before. They're starting businesses at six times the national average. By every metric of individual achievement and determination, they're excelling. And yet they still earn 36% less than white men doing similar work. And yet they remain dramatically underrepresented in leadership positions. And yet they receive just a tiny fraction of venture capital funding. As Sister Maya Angelou once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Well, the system has shown us what it is repeatedly. It's time we believed it. The second key insight from Dr. Wheaton's work is equally powerful. The burden of change should not fall on the oppressed. Think about the absurdity of this expectation. We don't ask people with broken legs to run marathons. We don't ask people without boats to save themselves from flooding. Yet somehow We expect those most harmed by systemic discrimination to be the primary architects of its dismantling. This isn't just unfair, it's mathematically impossible. Power, by definition, is concentrated in the hands of the few. Those without power cannot simply wish it into existence. They cannot dismantle systems they didn't build and don't control. Not alone. I spoke with Janelle, a brilliant software engineer with 3 advanced degrees. After being passed over for promotion 5 times while watching less qualified colleagues advance, she filed a discrimination complaint. The company's response? They suggested she needed more leadership training. This wasn't about her qualifications, this was about maintaining hierarchies. When Black women organized grassroots campaigns to bring national attention to the invisible job losses in their communities, they weren't just fighting for themselves, they were doing the heavy lifting that should have been shared by everyone who claims to care about justice. Real change requires those with privilege and power to actively participate in its redistribution. It requires white people to fight racism. It requires men to combat sexism. It requires those with institutional authority to change policies and practices. As Audre Lorde powerfully stated, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Those who benefit from current power structures must be willing to examine and relinquish their advantages. This brings us to Dr. Wheaton's third critical insight. Real solutions require power shifts, not just representation. We've made the mistake of confusing symbols with substance. We celebrate when a single Black woman reaches the C-suite without addressing the fact that only 5% of executive leadership positions are held by women of color. We applaud when a woman-owned business receives funding without acknowledging that women-led startups receive just 2% of venture capital. Representation matters. But representation without power redistribution is merely tokenism. For every 100 men promoted to manager positions, only 82 women of color receive the same opportunity. This isn't about qualifications or ambition. It's about who makes decisions and who benefits from maintaining the current hierarchy. I met Keisha, a brilliant entrepreneur who developed revolutionary healthcare technology. Despite her product's proven efficacy, she pitched to 157 venture capital firms before securing minimal funding. Meanwhile, less developed products with white male founders received millions in initial investments. The playing field isn't just uneven, it's a completely different game with different rules. When companies implemented transparent salary bands after public scrutiny, it wasn't because marginalized employees suddenly became more persuasive negotiators. It was because external pressure forced accountability. When lawsuits resulted in settlements forcing policy changes at large employers, it wasn't because individual victims became more deserving of justice. It was because collective action created consequences for discrimination. The path forward isn't about asking oppressed groups to work harder. It's about fundamentally restructuring who has access to resources and who sets the rules. As Dr. Wheaton's research demonstrates, even when Black women break through barriers, they often face new hurdles once they reach executive ranks or seek major investment. The goalposts keep moving, the rules keep changing because the game was never designed for their success. I am no longer accepting the things I cannot change. I am changing the things I cannot accept. Angela Davis's words remind us that transformation requires disruption, not accommodation. So, what would happen if more people adopted this perspective? If we stopped expecting marginalized groups to solve problems they didn't create? We'd see faster progress toward justice. We'd shift from performative gestures toward substantive change. We'd implement equitable hiring and promotion practices. We'd establish transparent pay standards. We'd enforce robust anti discrimination policies. We'd build truly inclusive leadership pipelines. But most importantly, we'd distribute the responsibility for creating change more fairly. We'd recognize that ending oppression is everyone's work, not just the work of those who suffer most from it. This isn't about guilt or blame. It's about accurate diagnosis leading to effective treatment. If we misidentify the problem, we'll never find the solution. The data is clear. Despite significant increases in entrepreneurship among Black women who now own over 2 million businesses, they face persistent barriers to success. Promotion bottlenecks, limited access to capital, and bias during fundraising rounds create ceilings that even the most talented and determined individuals struggle to break through. Some have broken through barriers thanks largely to peer support networks and targeted investment funds, but many found that early wins made future funding harder due to perceptions about preferential treatment. Generations fought stereotypes, doubting their capability, only to face new hurdles once they reached executive ranks or sought major investment. This isn't about individual shortcomings. This is about systemic resistance to change. So I ask you today, what are you willing to risk? What comfort will you sacrifice? What privilege will you leverage? Because make no mistake, this is not a spectator sport. There is no neutral ground. If you leave here today and do nothing differently, you have chosen the side of the status quo. If you recognize the truth of what I've shared but take no action, you become complicit in perpetuating these systems. The question isn't whether you believe in equality. The question is what you're willing to do about inequality. What specific concrete actions will you take tomorrow that you didn't take yesterday? Will you audit pay disparities in your organization? Will you challenge biased hiring practices? Will you invest in businesses owned by marginalized entrepreneurs? Will you amplify voices that systems try to silence? This is your moment of decision, not just intellectually, but practically, not just in principle, but in action. Because liberation isn't a theory, it's a practice, and it requires all of us, especially those with power and privilege, to practice it daily, consistently, courageously. The world is watching, history is watching. And most importantly, those fighting for their basic dignity and humanity are watching to see which side you choose. Choose wisely, choose boldly, choose now,